I think that the world we live in has really focused on labeling people and diagnosing people. And sometimes those diagnoses or labels become a new identity for people. And, when you're going through depression, right, you are not your depression, right? You are depressed. This is a state. It is not a trait.
Struggle is part of every life. The question is whether we waste it or allow it to become a catalyst for growth. Welcome to the Struggle Well podcast. If you're just joining us, this is a great place to start. In this episode, we're laying the foundation for what Struggle Well really means and the science of post-traumatic growth that shapes the work we do at Boulder Crest. Throughout this season, you'll hear real stories and conversations from veterans, first responders, and others who have faced profound struggle and discovered that it can become a powerful catalyst for growth. If you ever want to come back to the foundation of these conversations, this is the episode to revisit.
You can do this job and be healthy in it.
People can actually grow as a result of their struggle.
This podcast shares real stories of transformation and explores what it means to live well through life's challenges.
Welcome to the Struggle Well podcast. I'm your host, Britt Myers, joined by the man himself, Josh Goldberg, CEO of Boulder Crest Foundation. So excited to be sitting here with you today. Thanks for being with me.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, we've been talking about this podcast for a while, bringing it back. Why is now the time? Why are you excited about it?
I think the issues that we focus on at Boulder Crest of trying to create a world where people realize that it's possible to grow in the face of struggle, the society we live in is headed continually in the wrong direction. And I think we continue to pathologize struggle and diagnose everything. And I think we sap people of hope. And so the more that we can inject stories of growth and possibility and hope and tell the stories, I think the better we'll be as a society in recognizing that what doesn't kill us can make us wiser and can make us stronger.
Yeah, well, why do you think that is so important?
Well, Joseph Campbell, who I really admire, wrote the book, The Power of Myth, or did an interview with Bill Moyers. He said that if you don't like the story that a society is changing, then tell a new one. And when I think about post-traumatic growth and its sort of derivation of struggle well, I think that it's not telling a new story, it's telling the oldest story again. And obviously we've worked for the past year on telling the stories of people that we've encountered through our various programs. And I just don't think that people can hear enough that when we go through great difficulty in our life, it's not the end, but it can be a new beginning. And so I just don't think it gets old. And I think about Steve Jobs, who I admire. And Steve Jobs said the most powerful person on earth is a storyteller. And they shape the context in which I think people experience their lives. And so that's what you get to do. And so I'm super excited and couldn't be more grateful for you to play that role because I think it's essential.
I was going to say, I feel like I have a big ego boost right now that I am the most powerful person sitting here at this table.
I did share that with you when I sent you that quote that you needed to take it with a grain of salt. But when I heard it, it really it resonated with me. And it's something that role and part of relaunching the podcast is a piece of that. It's not the only piece, but it's a big piece. I think it's essential for our world because the alternative stories of people who go through awful things and their life is awful is just, I don't think it helps anybody and gets anyone anywhere.
Yeah, and the stories are going to be the biggest piece of this podcast, but what else do you think people can expect to hear as we move through this season? Why should they want to tune in besides you being here, obviously?
Well, I guess from my perspective, selfishly, I guess I have a lot to say. It's probably always been true in my life. And so I spend all of my time thinking about life, thinking about how we navigate life, and more importantly than that, reading and talking to people about their journeys. And yesterday I was in Washington State, in Idaho, and just getting the opportunity to talk to people and seeing their response to a different frame and just getting to listen from them and getting to learn. And I think getting to then, sit in front of a microphone and share that with people, I think is really powerful. So from my perspective, we will absolutely have lots of doses of you interviewing tons of interesting people from the worlds that we inhabit, the military world, the first responder world, the mental health world. But also I think, we're definitely going to talk books because it's one of my favorite things. Maybe movies or TV shows if appropriate. And then I think just some musings, I guess, as well, that hopefully I get the chance to be able to share some of those with the world.
Yeah, how many Nicholas Sparks books have you read? Because I've read almost all of them. I feel like that should probably be the back half of this podcast. I know you read them.
If that's the standard, then I guess I will have some homework to do. But that's good because I've got some long flights ahead of me. So just tell me what the list is and we'll do that. Or maybe I could just go to AI and get a summary. Maybe that could be a better option.
It probably is. They're all in New Bern, North Carolina. It's, it's tragedy and hope than romance.
It's like Viktor Frankl, Nicholas Sparks, just mix it up. It's good.
Yeah, exactly. Keep people on their toes. Well, you've already mentioned a few times struggle well, post-traumatic growth, but there might be some people who are listening to this that aren't as familiar with those terms and what that really means. So in the best way that you can, knowing that we only have a limited amount of time, how do you describe what struggle well is?
I think there's two parts, maybe like a literal one and then more of a philosophical one. The literal one is in the early days of Boulder Crest, and we started in 2013 as the product of Ken and Julia's imagination and generosity. We had spent time meeting with lots and lots of different people, community leaders, civilian groups, possible donors. And what they would say to us over and over again when they heard what we were doing is there anything you can do to help me, to help my sibling, to help my spouse? They're not a member of the military community, not a member of the first responder community. And they're like, well, in earnest, not really. Like, we're an organization that's chartered to help certain communities. And we spent a lot of time talking about it. And we're like, well, why don't we sit down and write a book that at least we have something to offer people? Mm-hmm. And so Ken and I spent about a year working on a book that we published in May of 2018 called Struggle Well, that I think captured all the lessons we had learned from 4 years of working to cultivate post-traumatic growth and facilitate and inspire people who are struggling to realize there's another way. And I think the second piece, which is the philosophical piece, is the reality of life is that every human being is going to go through struggle at some point. And the question isn't whether we will experience that. The question is how will we navigate it? Mm-hmm. And I tend to wear a lot of Struggle Well gear. I got my Struggle Well wristband on my arm. And my niece, who at the time was probably 8, she was like, Tio, which is what she calls me. She goes, Tio, you wear this Struggle Well stuff, and I don't want to struggle. And I was like, kiddo, remember when you broke your wrist and couldn't do gymnastics for like months? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, was that hard? She's like, yeah. I was like, was that a struggle? She's like, yeah. Remember when you had that weird eye thing and they couldn't figure out what was wrong with you? She's like, yeah. I was like, was that hard? Was that a struggle? She's like, yeah. It's like, you already struggled. And it's like, and the question and what we work on is how do we help adults to figure out how to navigate that? And so I think kind of behind the curtain, one of the things that's really important is certainly Struggle Well derives from post-traumatic growth, but not everyone would assign events in their life as traumatic. In some respects, because trauma means you were powerless to stop the thing that happened. And that's a very difficult kind of mountain for people to climb. But everyone, I think, would acknowledge that the struggle is real. And so for us, language matters, but that's really what this is all about, is what can we learn from each other? And the other piece that I think about is Desmond Tutu. And Desmond Tutu said we learn how to be human from one another. And so hopefully experiences you had, experiences I've had, experiences the guests have, will be useful to someone. Be like, oh, I haven't thought about that. I haven't thought about doing that. Maybe I should take this direction or this track or try this. I think we can breadcrumb one another and hopefully provide some hope, some strength, some experience that's useful.
Well, did your and Ken's book take place in New Bern, North Carolina?
No, but maybe the sequel could be more in the realm of like Struggle Well, the murder mystery. I don't really have a great frame to comment on Nicholas Sparks. Like what I don't, we can have that different conversation.
Yeah, that's for another episode.
But yeah, maybe that's the next version of this.
I mean, it couldn't hurt. It's a pretty popular guy. Okay, so what were you hearing when you were having some of those conversations? Because I think when you hear Struggle Well or when you hear post-traumatic growth, it doesn't seem like, it actually seems obvious when you really sit down and you listen to the philosophy behind it. And like you've said, the idea that there can be something better. Otherwise, there's no reason to have any hope or optimism if it's just, well, this bad thing happened to me and that's always going to be something I carry. It's never going to get better from here. But were you hearing any objections or challenges from people as you guys were kind of seeding this concept and really like bringing to light what Struggle Well and post-traumatic growth is or could be?
I feel like, and you alluded to this, is I don't actually think that anything that we talk about is new or something that people don't know somewhere inside of them. And whether that's the collective unconscious, the idea that inside of us we have this wisdom, wherever it comes from. Carl Jung talked about this. I think we know this, but I don't think we know that we know it. And when you are struggling or when you are around people who you care about who are struggling, I think life gets very narrow and very myopic very quickly. And so I think the only time that we've seen maybe resistance is I think that the world we live in has really focused on labeling people and diagnosing people. And sometimes those diagnoses or labels become a new identity for people. And, less than a handful of times you'd have somebody who feels like we're invalidating their struggle or their experience. And it's like, it's not that. But, when you're going through depression, right, you are not your depression, right? You are depressed. This is a state. It is not a trait. And I think that that's kind of the nuance of the conversation. It's another reason why a podcast is a great platform to have conversations. And I was listening to one this morning, and it was talking about how ironic it is that people really only want to watch like 6-second videos, but they'll listen to like 2-hour podcasts. Now, I know we're not going to, maybe we will, but we're probably not going to do 2-hour podcasts. But it's interesting because I think there's an appetite from people for longer form conversations that allow for nuance and for people to really hear what you're trying to say.
And I think, like you said at the beginning, the power I hold as a storyteller, but really anybody, like I told you when you sent me that quote, and I said it's really the people who are telling the stories, because there is a lot of vulnerability. You have to open yourself up to share some really personal things, to hopefully help not just yourself, but somebody else. And I think that's what I'm really looking forward to as we dive in more this season, is hearing just the experiences that people are going through and what they've learned from it. And I think what I hear time and time again is the people that we talk to are usually not doing it just for themselves. I think they feel the benefit of that, but it's always to help somebody else. And that's kind of what I wanted to ask you about with the story component. And you've heard so many over the, 10, 15 years you've been working with Boulder Crest now? 12. You've heard plenty of stories, I'm sure, but are there some that stand out to you, or some that you felt like you kind of keep holding on to or hold in your heart that you would want to share?
And the other thing, and I will answer that question, is, when Dr. Tedeschi and Dr. Calhoun, the two psychologists who coined the term post-traumatic growth, their initial work was going to people's houses and sitting with them and listening to their stories and asking people not just like what happened, but what they learned from what happened. And the response that everybody had was nobody had ever asked them that, and that they appreciated the opportunity to kind of reflect and make sense of it. And they knew that it was going to help somebody else, which is a core part of post-traumatic growth and struggling well, is that you go through these experiences and you don't keep them to yourself because you want to be able to share what you've learned. And that's both healing for yourself, but it's also helpful to other people. And for me, it's interesting because it's a constant stream where people come up to you and you get to hear incredible stories. And I guess at some level, and I have a good memory, is they all stick with you. I think the two that I've never been able to forget, and they've come from the early days of Boulder Crest, was a young man who told me that he hadn't laughed in 13 years. And he laughed his ass off throughout the week. And joy is such a magnificent thing, and it's such a necessary thing. And to get to see him laughing and then have him tell me that was like, it's I don't know if it's a little thing, but it's an amazing thing. And then it's the same vein, and maybe it's just that I'm someone who values joy. There was another young man who had turned over every photo in his house of him smiling because he couldn't bear the sight because he never thought he'd be happy again. And in that program, and it was down in South Carolina, he hadn't touched his guitar or sang in years. And he sang for all of us. And it was just like you get to see in this very short period of time this huge transformation, and it's amazing. Like, it just, you get goosebumps, you get tears, you smile. It's like all the things all at once, and it's an amazing thing. And so these stories that people share, and I had a gentleman presented at this conference before me, and then he had actually gone through struggle well training, and he had gotten shot twice by some really pretty bad dudes. And it was amazing, like, listening to him taking the frame of what we teach in Struggle Well and putting it onto his life and having language for the other side of the story, because we have so much language for the bad stuff, but we don't have language and frames for the good. But it's like, if I said to you, like, hey, one of the areas where when people are going through struggle that they find greater meaning in their life is they realize how much relationships matter to them. And you start to say, it's like, okay, well, how has that occurred for you? And all of a sudden the light bulb goes on and people are like, oh my God, I've never thought about it. I haven't synthesized this experience because no one ever asked me the right question.
Yeah.
And that's what part of why we wanted you to host this, is that you ask amazing questions and you create environments where people feel they trust you, they feel connected to you, and it's because you're honest and you're earnest and you're authentic, and then they're willing to share things they may not share with anybody else. And just taking another person and plopping them in, you may not get them to be willing to do that. And so I'm deeply grateful to you for your spirit and your energy and what you bring. not just your power as a storyteller.
What other stuff do you like about me? Just kidding.
Your love of Disney?
Yes.
We
don't need to bring that up.
Sorry.
I do hide it.
Yeah.
I said I'm on the verge of becoming a Disney adult. I'm not full-blown
Just
yet.
closeted, it's fine.
Yes. To all the Disney people out there, they get it. They know.
Yeah, I don't.
There's probably an Easter egg hidden in here, Mickey ears somewhere that you don't even know about.
All right.
Somebody's going to find him. What I love about, though, just like going back real quick, seriously, of something you said, which is training, struggle well training. And I think that's just such a powerful concept. But where did that question come from, that idea of, like, you and Ken obviously saw that there was this problem, for lack of a better word, there's this solvable thing maybe in front of you. Where did that question of, can this be taught or can it be trained?
You know, it's funny because they say that like failure is an orphan and success has many fathers. And I'm grateful to work with a man, and Ken and Julie as well, who I say are constitutionally incapable of taking credit for things. Because it's hard, like when you go back and it's like, well, who came up with struggle? It's like, well, you can't really remember. And more importantly, it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. And I say all of that because I think in this circumstance, you know, what we were staring at when we opened in 2013, so we opened this privately funded retreat for combat veterans and their families, host other people's programs. Programs are okay. So we're going to build our own. Mm-hmm. And part of what we were trying to analyze was, why is it that people in the communities we serve, why won't they seek quote unquote help? Mm-hmm. And I think the language, this is what I talked about at the beginning, is like how you talk about stuff matters. And so the idea of treatment is generally there's a power differential. Someone's doing something to you. It's not necessarily capacity building. And so you start to look at that and it's like, well, what do people really need when they're struggling? And, you know, for Ken, unlike myself, he spent a lot of time in the military and almost 22 years in the Navy and then ran a counterterrorism training company. For him, I think part of it was there are very few people in the worlds we serve who don't get excited to get to go to the next training, mm-hmm. right? They get to learn new skills that they get to then bring to bear to become better masters of their craft. And I think it is that idea that he brought into the notion of what we were trying to do with Posttraumatic Growth and with Warrior Path to start with, which is one of our other programs. Mm-hmm. And Ken had that notion. And when we talked to Rich Tedeschi, and he explained to us really that he'd been studying post-traumatic growth and maybe lightly facilitating it, it was like for us, it's like, no, like we have to kind of hit this hard. Mm-hmm. And how would you go about doing that? And so for us, that's, I think, the training idea is like, let's not be subtle about this. Let's be very, very explicit and say like, hey, this is what we're here to do. We are here to teach you who are struggling with any range of struggle from PTSD, anxiety, depression, suicide, whatever it is we're going to teach you how to experience post-traumatic growth in your life. And we're going to train you how to do that. But more importantly than that, we're going to train you to keep doing it. And mm-hmm. so that's, I think, I'll give Ken full credit for that, is the short answer to a long response.
Yeah. Well, we're going to be hearing a lot of personal stories, like you said. We're going to be diving in pretty deep this season. But is there anything else you think somebody that's maybe new to Struggle Well should know before we get kind of further into the season? Or is it kind of just come along for the journey with us and it'll sort of lay itself out?
Yeah, I'd say come along for the journey. You know, we started this podcast a number of years ago, and then Ken and I were doing it. Sometimes it would be me, sometimes it would be him, but it's hard. Like the two of us are busy. We run around a lot. So
I have nothing going on.
Exactly.
So this
You're
is
just
perfect.
like just super easy.
Yeah.
You don't have any family or kids, anyone depending on you.
Nope.
And so we did it, and we interviewed different people who we kind of knew in our orbit and in our world. And some of it also COVID happened and the rest of it. And so like retabling this, I'd like to think that whatever episode you start on, I don't think it's linear, is I think just come along for the ride. And I think you'll find that obviously certain guest stories resonate more or less. And the one common thread to all of it is, as a civilian in these worlds, is the reality is that the people that we serve are human beings first and foremost, and that as human beings, we all go through difficulty, and whatever causes us to struggle is less material than the way we experience that struggle, the way we react to it, and then the way we navigate it and come out the other side. And that's where I think we can learn lessons from anybody. And so, but I'm excited, and I think, yeah, just come along for the ride, and there, you know, maybe things you love, things you don't like, and give us feedback. Let us know if you have ideas for guests. You know, we're all ears. Yeah,
unless it's negative feedback about me, and I don't want to hear that. But they can tell you, and then you gloss over it.
Yeah, I will package it in a way where you can absorb it effectively.
Perfect.
You know? Yeah.
Good leadership.
We'll tell a parable that, you know, I don't know, use Winnie the Pooh or something.
Yeah, doesn't have to be Disney, but.
Okay, I didn't know if Winnie the Pooh was Disney, so.
I don't know either.
All right.
I'm not a full Disney adult. I don't know all the characters.
I'm excited for your journey, though.
Me too.
On many fronts.
Yes. And thank you so much for just everything you said, but for the opportunity to be part of telling these stories and hearing these stories. And you and I are both going to be sharing our own, so kind of a you jump, I jump situation here. But I'm excited to be on this journey with you and to keep sharing more, hearing more, doing more, struggling well, I guess, going forward.
Well, yeah, thank you for joining our Band of Misfits and for being willing to do this. And I'm super excited. And I'm excited not just because, yes, the podcast is being relaunched and you're the new host, but the reality is you've been engaging with our community members for a long time. And so I'm excited for you to get to share yours and share mine. Like you said, we go first in all things. And so don't ask people to do stuff you haven't done or aren't willing to do. So
Exactly. Well, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having the faith. And it does need to be said that if people want to look a little more up about these programs, you can get that outside of the podcast too if you have to.
Yes.
And you can find that at bouldercrest.org. But hopefully we'll see everybody back for the next episode.